From Bungoma, Gongwa, MONBASA, MVITA. Today I'm going to talk about Kenyan Rift Valley, Happy Valley. From the whirlwind city of Nakuru, or in Ma, a place of the whirlwind, comes a story of the colonial past. When Britain took Kenya as a protectorate, the British nationals of Viking origin or the white origin settled in the cool, productive places they called the White Islands. They brought the Indian coolies to work the railway line and gave us the tribe of the Kenyan of Indian descent, who have descendants who have done a great lot in improving the economy of the Kenyan country. They made the Arabs who had occupied the coastal region and intermarried with the locals there to form the language called Swahili. And in the Second World War, they conscripted people from Sudan, Nubia, and gave us the tribe of the Kenyan Nubian tribe. And also we were privileged in that a former president, though he was infamous later, of the neighboring country called President Idi Amin Dada, he enlisted in the African Rifles in Kenya and was recruited and stationed in the town of the Whirlwind, Nakuru, in the Lanet military camp. Idi Amin was a soldier during the colonial era, almost before independence, in the African Rifle, stationed in Lanet. When the white settlers came, they started an apartheid system. I know many Kenyans now who are born recently cannot even imagine that in this country there were apartheid systems. People lived according to the races. When the white settlers of Viking origin came, they gave themselves large tracts of land, thousands of acres, and they lived the first-class life. All commercial farming of things like tea, things like hybrid cattle was a reserve to them and a protection by law. The people of other races could not keep those things. They were theirs. Then the second position people after they settled, after building the railway, were those of Indian origin. Most of them were traders. And the Arabs, who had been a long time trading partners of Africa, they had been trading throughout. They took the third position. And the last position was for the indigenous people, who were put together in places that were called reserves. So you will be put together, and when you wanted to go to town, you had to get a pass to go to the white settlement area. You could not go without a pass, you would be arrested. And the school system was different. Very good education and very good schools for the white population. Moderate schools for the Indian population, who are there in many towns. We still have those of Kenyans of Indian descendants. And the third were people of Arabic descendants. And then now the schools that were of lower quality, they were just to train workers, that is all, were for the Africans. things weren't changing. That's why we have systems and we've had interactions with people from different places. Kenyans of my age have had with people of all races, because eventually when these schools were amalgamating and then coming now pure African, there was a time when people would mix. Like when I went to the secondary school, it had prominently been Indian school. Now there were, and some whites had been there, and now the Africans were now mixing up. So things like that happened. But I'm going to talk about families that came from Britain and wherever at that time. There were families that called themselves a Happy Valley families. And just like any other places, they had their own vices. They will have orgies, they will have drunkenness, they will take drugs, and all those things. And they were the first ones to embrace occultism, which was later, people of other races were permitted later, and then eventually even the Africans, some of Africans were permitted to join the groups of these occultic secret organizations. Most of those were centered around Nakuru town and Naivasha. Naivasha is a Ma word because that was also Ma country. The Maasais occupied most of the countries prior to the Europeans coming. So Ma means a place that heaves. There is a lake called Lake Naivasha. It shows wave action when wind blows. So that is where the town got the name Naivasha, a place that heaves. This system began there and then spreading to Nairobi, because these were the same groups that would operate to Nairobi, to places around the country. They were the major players. They were called the lords. So people will say, I've gone to Lord so-and-so, I've gone to Lord so-and-so. They had special places that were for whites only, even hotels. And they had special treatment. They had it all. When they started this this occult thing, that some also embraced as religions, went to private members who will be enlisted by having somebody who knows you to introduce you, and you had to be of that class. And there were things that were happening, and that brings me to this issue. There have been occultic happenings, killings and all that in the country. We should know that those are not our traditional things. No, Africans were not performing those things traditionally. A few are in those occults secretly because they are private clubs. And this has brought issues. Like we had a psychopath who claimed to have killed more than 17 women, called Onyancha. When he was interviewed, he said he'd been introduced to this occultic thing by his teacher, a lady teacher. And from that time when she introduced him, all he could think was killing and drinking blood from people. Then later, another psychopath who was nicknamed Fugu started also the same activities. He would go to the bus stages or streets where there are no people, and mostly he was an abductor of girls. Then he would take them to his house forcefully with a knife. He will abduct them with knives, armed, so that they don't make noise, and he will make sure he takes them to his house where he was, and then he will gag them and dress them in white and tie them. And he would draw the blood with a syringe, drinking, until when they died, and then he would bury them secretly. Eventually, the last time, God always helps his people. He abducted a young girl from the bus stage, and she was not as resistant as others are. And he drank blood from her for some days. She also found some girls, and they were dying and getting buried. You can imagine that scenario. And because she appeared calm and whatever, and she did not give him as many problems as he thought others were giving her, he decided to let her go, knowing that she was going to die anyway. She was not going to go anywhere. By God's grace, he was able to move up to a police station in Naivasha and alerted the police, and the police came and got this guy in his hideout. When he was questioned, he said a priest introduced him to the occult. So that's why I was telling you about the occults and whatever has been happening in the previous talk we had. They have been infiltrated everywhere. You see, that is a teacher introducing, a priest introducing, and other people from other clubs and whatever that you may not know. So why am I talking about this? Many of these occultic murders, you've had the Shakahola thing happening. You hear of a pastor leading people to commit suicide. You've heard of the university girl who was slaughtered in the guest house and her head taken. The head was later found somewhere else. Occultic murders. There was that thing of where bodies had been dumped in the quarry. Occultic murders. Why am I talking about this? I'm trying to bring it out that this world is not the way we see it. Things are happening. There are people who get spiritual energy, other different drives in different aspects in life. They have to commit those occultic sacrifices. And there are groups of occultic murders that move around, hidden. The origin of that place was of those things that were introduced there, and the foreign occults that were introduced there, and eventually with the private membership, many who are members, you may not know, but they have to ascribe to those occultic murders, occultic rites, in order to be able to rise differently in their, be it places of career, financial, and all those things. So when we sit around, we should not just ignore and say, Onyancha was arrested, Fugu was arrested, they are still looking. No, these things are still moving around. There are people in our midst who look just like you and me, who you will innocently call anything, those big careers you call, but they are members. And when an opportunity arises, they are able to cheat people, get them into that situation. So I will always advise, when dealing with people, get to know them. Do not be fast in hiking lifts. There was an incident of a woman in Narok who was to travel with the husband, and the vehicle could not be found, so the husband went and she was told to travel, and a good Samaritan, in quote, stopped a vehicle and she got in. And the last that was heard of her was sending a message, these people who did this in a private car, they are not stopping there, and that is the last. Up to now, she's never been heard of. So that tells you what is happening within the society. Some of the murders you find are occultic murders. Some of these things you see happening, occultic, some disappearances, go with that. So we educate one another. We should not be found napping, sleeping, thinking that everything, because these ones operate secretly. Secretly. So I would just like to say it's not in Kenya alone. It's happening across the world because these are all cults that came from outside. But the Kenyan population, let's be cautious. This is a reality. This is a danger that is lurking all the time. Do not take things for granted. I'm talking that from whatever I've talked in the past. You know where I started my race from. And you know the neighboring place. And you know those things still happen even every town in Kenya. There's no place that is free of those things. And across the country, there was a preacher who was saying that there is some place in Uganda. When he was there, he was told your vehicle should not break down, because if it breaks down here, things may. There are people who have come. We had these things of Tanzania where albinos were being slaughtered. That just those occultic things. We know what is happening in Congo and all those places. So there's no place that is immune to this. There's no place that can say this is just a Kenyan problem. But Kenyans, beware. This thing is free. That's my take for that.